clearly giving him an accurate time frame for how long he was asleep. Slumped back into the couch, his muscles relaxing from their tense state, Naruto used his good hand to move the hanging bang from his eye. Naruto sighed softly as he looked out the window thinking about what he had just experienced. Who was that and why did he keep asking me what I can see? I can see things just fine. This world is corrupted and unjust. Naruto took a deep breath as images of his childhood threatened to flood his consciousness. Naruto took twilight from its resting place next to him and rose up into the air, getting the sunlight to gleam off the metal, making it shine brilliantly. In the reflection on the metal, Naruto's eyes could be seen shifting from an azure blue to a bloody red. With his Sharingan spinning as he stared deeply into the metal, Naruto's hand tightened around the sword. I'll use my strength to fix those problems, at least in this village. And maybe on a grander scale. Naruto added in when he actually thought about the proposition of cleansing the corruption of the current system. Naruto cut the flow of his chakra to his eyes, letting the red recede back to his original blue eyes as he put twilight back where it was resting. Naruto stood up and went to the bathroom to wash up, which he found to be very difficult with one arm and hand. After the fiasco of trying to maintain his hygiene and getting dressed, Naruto walked back into the living room. Just as Naruto was about to sit down, there was a knock at the door to his compound. Naruto groaned silently as he glared at the door in annoyance. Please, not Anbu. Naruto pleaded mentally as he walked towards the door. With each step his trepidation grew and grew. Placing his hand on the handle of the door that had the kanji for lock on it, Naruto plastered on his stoic look before opening the door to greet his visitor. Naruto arched an eyebrow at his visitor, curious to their reason for coming to see him, especially since he only wanted to rest at the moment. The person standing across from him was not an Anbu, but his opponent for the semifinal match, Yuna. Of course, the raven-haired swordsman was curious to find out how she found out where he lived. Naruto stared at Yuna for a few more moments before speaking. It's nice to see you again, Yuna. May I ask how you found out where I live? Naruto asked, his voice not to give away any amusement or annoyance. Yuna averted her eyes from Naruto since he made it seem like she was stalking him like a lost puppy. Smiling at Naruto, Yuna laughed slightly at Naruto's question in a way to put herself more at ease. Well, I bumped into this kid and he was talking about you and kind of gave away that you lived in this apartment. I think his name was Konohamaru. Yuna cupped her chin with one of her hands, looking up into the sky. Naruto forced himself to bite back the curse that felt the need to come from his lips at this moment in time. I am going to have a nice long talk with that brat about keeping his mouth shut every now and then. Naruto thought in frustration, his hand clenching around the doorframe, the action unseen by Yuna. I see. Well, what can I do for you today? Naruto asked, pulling the conversation back on track. Yuna blinked before looking at Naruto expectantly, making Naruto feel like he was forgetting something. The feeling only intensified when she put her hands on her hips and tilted her head ever so slightly to the left. What did you forget about the date already, Naruto? She asked with a cheeky grin that had. Naruto narrowed his eyes in thought. Actually, I did. Fighting a Biju and then being knocked out for the 3 days following will do that to a person. Not to mention that weird experience with that voice. Naruto looked to Yuna and could see that she was anything but amused by his very viable excuse. Did I mention the broken arm? Well, it is a good thing that we have 2 of those pesky arms, huh? Yuna said in obvious sarcasm, making Naruto frown. Before anything else was said, Yuna gripped Naruto's good arm and pulled him out of the door with a surprising amount of strength. Thankfully, the door shut when Naruto was pulled away and the kanji for lock glowed on the handle. Naruto and Yuna were walking down the streets of Konoha in silence since neither really knew what to say to the other. The shaky start made Yuna wonder if she had made the wrong choice, asking the teen next to her out on a date without getting to know him first. Naruto, who was looking straight ahead, ignored the respectful and fearful looks he was on the receiving end of. Where are we going on this date, Yuna? Naruto asked, since it seemed that Yuna had pretty much had everything planned out before coming to him, aside from his living arrangements. Yuna glanced at Naruto and saw that he was still looking straight ahead, which she quickly did as well. Just this little place I passed on my way to your apartment. After all, I am not from this village, remember? Naruto nodded his head, since it was true she was a foreign kunoichi in alien territory, so to speak. When the 2 young nin got to the small restaurant, they were given a small booth near the back of the restaurant, away from the few patrons that were already eating their meals. The 2 waited in silence for their meals to arrive, which they did after a respectable amount of time. A few minutes into their meal, Yuna had enough of the silence and started off a small conversation with her date. Then, just like that, the date went off without a hitch, with both parties engaging in a lively conversation. Yuna was laughing along with Naruto at the times that there were jokes shared. Did you hear about the incident just before the first match? Yuna asked carefully as she treaded on possibly dangerous grounds. Naruto snorted, finding the thought that he should care about the ramblings of the hateful insects to be amusing at the very least. Yuna was just glad that she didn't offend Naruto in any way, knowing that some Jinchuriki could be sensitive about their social status. I really don't care what those narrow-minded fools think or say about me. What do you think about Jinchuriki Yuna? Naruto was curious about the state of mind of something from outside of the village hidden in the leaves. Yuna smiled and didn't even break eye contact with Naruto, telling the young Uchiha all he needed to know. While I'll admit I don't know all that much about the Jinchuriki, that doesn't mean I fear them. In Iwa our Jinchuriki are much older than I and usually are only around when the village is in a time of crisis. Yuna admitted honestly in between bites of her food, getting Naruto to wonder what his life would be like had he possessed the experience and strength to be able to roam free. Naruto had something akin to approval in his blue eyes regarding what Yuna had just said about he and his fellow containers. The rest of the date passed with friendly conversation about their villages. The two genin didn't have to worry about village secrets or anything like that since they were only genin. What they were speaking about was village life and what kind of things happened within a typical day inside of their villages. Then when you ask him about his final, Naruto just chuckled and replied trade secret, earning him a pout which he laughed harder at. Naruto decided to be the gentleman and pay for the meal, earning an amused smile from his female companion, which he ignored under a stoic facade. Naruto and Yuna made their way from the restaurant to the hotel where the Iwa shinobi were staying until the promotion ceremony. Yuna informed Naruto as they walked that each village was taking lodging in different hotels to avoid tensions between the shinobi. Naruto nodded since it would make sense to keep an international incident from happening on the streets of Konoha. Just as the two shinobi turned the corner, there was a loud collective shout of "Look," followed by a swarm of children. Yuna stepped to the side of the street when she saw the kids moving to surround her date, content to watch with a small smile. "Were you scared when you had to fight that huge monster?" A boy with black hair asked excitedly, giving Naruto a starry-eyed look of admiration. Naruto was at a loss for words. Never before had the young shinobi been the center of such feelings of respect and even admiration. A young girl wearing a red blouse flipped her brown hair like a whip and let out a small scoff when the boy finished talking, Naruto's lack of an answer giving her time to give her own on his behalf. There is no way that Naruto-sama was scared. "Did you see that huge he used to beat that ugly thing?" the girl asked the boy, slightly annoyed by how he portrayed Naruto. She turned back to Naruto with a small smile as she bowed her head. "Thank you for saving us, Naruto-sama." Naruto, now more collected after the sudden influx of admiration had flustered him, gave the small girl a warm smile. The girl looked up when she felt the weight of a hand resting on her head. She blushed when she saw the warm smile of Naruto. "As a shinobi of this village, it is my job to protect you." Naruto's eyes panned from the girl to the rest of the group, listening intently to his words. "All of you?" The children who had gathered around the Chunin exams winner were all left speechless as their small bodies were filled with a sense of awe for the shinobi in front of them. Naruto smiled at all of them, glad to see that the hatred of their elders had not infected their pure souls. "I want to be just as strong as you are, Naruto-san," the boy with goggles declared, his small fists clenched determinedly. This exclamation got a round of nods from children in the group, earning a small smile from Naruto. Naruto could tell from the looks of the children that they were either first-year students or were a year from entering the ninja academy. Naruto shook his head softly as he smiled out at the children who were focusing on them. "No, you all need to enjoy your childhood by spending time with your friends and family. You will get strong, but don't rush it. You'll have plenty of time to get strong, but now go have fun." Naruto ushered them off, getting the kids to run off with huge smiles on their faces. The brown-haired girl who had spoken stood there in front of Naruto for a few moments, just looking at him like he was a hero. This made him chuckle inwardly. After a few moments, she too grew a megawatt smile before bowing to him and running to catch up with the rest of the children. This is what a childhood should be. Naruto thought happily as he watched the children running around yelling and smiling. There was not a shred of animosity between any of the children, and all of them were having fun with the others. Yuna took her place next to Naruto again with a smile as she watched the children as well. "That was unexpected that you were so receptive to them." Yuna teased Naruto as they started to walk back towards the hotel where the Iwagakure shinobi were being housed. Naruto chuckled at the small but playful chime in his date's voice. It felt good to laugh and smile as much as he had done today. "I am a sucker for children. They are so pure and innocent. They deserve to be happy and safe, and that's what I plan to do." Naruto spoke with conviction. He looked straight ahead, missing the approving look Yuna was giving him. The pair eventually arrived at the front of the hotel and stood to look at each other. "I had fun today," Yuna said, rubbing the side of her arm a little bit awkwardly since she really didn't know what to say today. Naruto, who was in the same boat, managed to keep his poise a little better than his female companion. "This is the best time I have had in a while. I wouldn't mind doing it again if we are ever in the same place again." Naruto admitted, getting Yuna to beam in happiness, while Naruto settled for a more subdued smile. It wasn't a lie either. While spending time with Hiruzen and Makoto was nice, it was different than hanging out with someone around his age. Yuna looked at Naruto for a few moments with a look that was far away, almost reminiscent, and it made Naruto wonder. Yuna acted boldly and crossed the distance separating her and Naruto with one full stride. Acting quickly, Yuna embraced Naruto softly, making sure to avoid aggravating his injury. Before Naruto could even decide if he was going to reciprocate, Yuna had pulled away and hurried into the hotel, hiding her blush from her date. Naruto stood there in front of the hotel with an owlish look in his eyes before he broke from his stupor and started to chuckle to himself. Naruto, now wearing a content smile, started the long walk back to his home. What a day. It was the day of the promotion ceremony, and the atmosphere all around Konoha was abuzz with anticipation and excitement. The judges had collected the tallies for each competitor of the exams, and the results were ready to be told. The Chunin exams had brought in record ratings all around the continent, but now it was time they came to an end. The reason being that job requests were put on a halt for the time, so both village and customer could assess the new talent and adjust who they wished to hire accordingly. The ceremony was originally set to take place in a large ballroom, with the only people attending were those approved beforehand, but thanks to the popularity of the tournament, the people demanded to be able to see their favorites get promoted. Eventually it was agreed to hold the ceremony back in the stadium, after it was repaired of course. The crowd had filled the seats and looked down at the center of the arena, chatting happily. The crowd wasted no time in showering the arena with their adulation when the former competitors made their way to the center of the field. The staff of the tournament had them stand with their squads in a single file line across the field. With nothing to look at, each former competitor looked into the stands where shinobi and civilians alike were mixed and seated. Some genin reciprocated the crowd's love, while others showed nothing and stood at attention. Once the arrangement of the genin was handled, the former proctors of the exam called for the cage to make their entrance onto the field. 5 of the strongest shinobi in the world, followed by their bodyguards, were given no small amount of praise from the crowd either. Each cage responded to the praise with their own gesture of acknowledgement to the crowd. Each of you has performed well and should be proud of just how far you have come. We all hope that you have learned from any mistakes you have made during these exams. Judges who were present for the entirety of the exams have come up with a decision regarding each of your promotions, and that judgment is final. Genma nodded once he got nods of acceptance from the genin across from them. Genma stepped away from the group of genin while the beautiful Mizukage took a step forward and looked at the 5 shinobi from her village that had made it this far. Hintao, while it is true that you fought an obviously superior opponent, you still did not show enough to secure a promotion. Mei told the boy to get him to nod in understanding before bowing and taking a step back in line. Their water release techniques were indeed impressive, and you had a brilliant idea to try and infuriate your opponent, but then you fell for the same trick, and it has cost you dearly. Mei looked at the arm that was luckily reattached by Tsunade. With it clear that she wasn't going to receive a promotion, Terra took a step back. Kakujo was the next to take a step forth. You showed tremendous skill with your Kekkei Genkai Kakujo, yet you did not take your opponent seriously and finish her off when you had ample opportunity. This was your undoing in both the fight and in securing your promotion. Kakujo grimaced at the stern words and looked slightly despondent but melded back into line to be replaced by Haku. Haku, in your first fight you did well to use the elements around you to hide your true skills, like a true shinobi should. Then you used your separate elements to create an advantage over your opponent in the second round, who was formidable in their own right. I see no reason to not promote you. Mei said with a happy smile while handing over a Chunin vest to the Ice Princess, getting a radiant smile from the girl. Your swordsmanship has come so far since you have started training in the art. Not only that, but you also showed excellent skill with your water release skill. Your precise strikes with the sword disable one of, and even though the abnormal ending of your second match, you have been promoted as well. The Tsuchikage stepped out next and looked straight at his granddaughter, getting her to gulp audibly. The Tsuchikage smirked slightly, seeing the discomfort that Kuretsuchi was displaying through body language. It is clear that you have shown both potential and capabilities expected to that of a Chunin, but you were too readily accepting of getting into a fist fight which ended in your loss. Hubris is something that can kill you, and if you became a Chunin, that would kill your team as well. You are not being promoted this time. Akatsuchi, you have shown the drive to research your first opponent and use your month to the point where you rendered their most vital ability useless. Not only that, but you had an impressive showing against a Jinchuriki. I don't even need to mention what you used in this assessment. Well done, my boy. Handing over the Chunin flag, the Tsuchikage glanced over to Yuna. Yuna, you by far have given the best performance out of the shinobi from our village. You displayed tremendous skill in the fields of Nin and Jinjutsu. These skills help you defeat the Nanabi Jinchuriki and take you to the semifinals. You have come very far since your time in the academy, and I can't be more proud. Inoki added with a large grin, giving his Kunoichi her vest. Yuna took the vest and bowed deeply to her superior happiness radiating off her. Irakage was next as he pushed out of the line of cage to stand in front of his 4 shinobi that had competed in the exams and made it to the final tournament. Carry, while you showed that your skills with a blade are rapidly improving, you also let your opponent prepare that could have very well killed you. No promotion. The hulking Raikage's gruff voice had Carry grimace visibly. Amoy, well, you showed just as much progress with your sword as Carry, if not more, you happened to run into an opponent who was within the same specialty, just more advanced. Unfortunately, one fight can't get you a promotion. Work on your arsenal and next semester I have no doubt you will get the promotion. Amoy nodded before getting back in line, where Samui stepped up next. You showed understanding of the situation by wasting time to figure out an opponent's weakness. Then you showed an excellent grasp of Ranton in your match with Haku, but ran into an obstacle and elemental disadvantage. If you train to overcome this, then the sky might be the limit. Yet you still have earned that promotion, congratulations. Samui took her flak in her usual cool and calm grace before letting the Jinchuriki take her turn. Your Taijutsu skill was far and above that expected of a Chunin while it was applied tactically. You displayed an excellent amount of control over your fire release, but also knew when it was time to retreat, a key factor for a Chunin. With a few months of service and a few completed missions as a team leader, you can make Jounin as well. Very well done. Vegito took the vest with a smile as she mentally thanked Nibi for the praise, but not before sneaking a glance at Naruto. The ever-stern Kazekage came to the front of the line next, staring down his three children with no emotion clear on his face. The three were already familiar with the scowl he always was wearing, so that was no giveaway. You had an unfortunate matchup that resulted in your defeat. Let this push you to find a way to deal with those who threaten you by getting in close. Turning his hard glare to his daughter, he continued with his assessment of his children. Tamari, you showed excellent progress with your war fan, but you were defeated by a singular because you let your emotions rule you. You will not be promoted, but if you fix those problems then you will secure the position. Staring down his youngest son, there were a few very tense moments between father and son. Eventually the Kazekage spoke. Gaara. Your control over the powers of sand is outstanding. Your lack of control though is concerning and is the overall reason you will not be promoted. Gaara nodded his head in understanding with an even stare, which should the Kazekage note the change in his son. The Hokage came forth next and stood in front of Team 9, first looking at the three shinobi who were held back a year to be ready for this stage. Niji, you have shown you are truly gifted with your clan techniques, but that wasn't enough when battling with someone who showed an elemental talent. If you wish to continue this path you must train harder. Lee, your skill with Taijutsu could easily be on the level of a rookie Jounin, but it lacks any direction. Without strategically planning out your attacks, you leave yourself vulnerable to someone who is able to counter your strength and speed. You need more thought in your fighting style if you wish to be a Chunin. Then 10, well, I have never seen anything like your weapon-based ninjutsu, it still is not enough to be promoted. You didn't show any tactical thinking. Your whole wide reach was also avoidable as was displayed. Then when you ran into the wind element your aim was thrown off and your skill was halved. You will not be promoted either. Minato turned to the Yamanaka heiress with an apologetic smile on his face, getting the girl to sigh. No, I don't think I need to go into the reason why you will not be promoted, right? Minato asked, getting a nod from his subordinate. The fire shadow turned to Choji, who also nodded, telling his cage that he didn't need an explanation either. Shikamaru, while it is said that you are lethargic and often unmotivated, you showed so much in these exams. You used one to basically defeat two opponents, while only using the advantages of the elements provided by an outdoor stadium. Then when you forfeited to Chijiro because of your lack of chakra, it showed forward thinking and the ability to retreat. You have been promoted. Shikamaru took the vest while mumbling something troublesome, getting Minato to chuckle softly. Sakura, you fought a tough opponent, no doubt. It may have been smarter to forfeit, but you showed a fighting spirit and the super strength of our legendary medic, which are good building blocks for future exams. Keep up your training and then try your hand next time. Minato spoke kindly, getting the pink-haired girl to smile in appreciation. Turning his eyes to the Uchiha of Team 7, his face became much more strict. He still was not very happy that he tried to use an assassination on his son. Sasuke displayed excellent skill in the fire release, which is expected of an Uchiha. You also were able to wield an air rank assassination. Sasuke's smirk grew tenfold as he made his assumptions. But you lost your first fight and have not shown enough to become a Chunin. Sasuke scowled but said nothing to the much more powerful shinobi. Narumi, your control over water was plenty to put you past the Chunin level. You also showed you are able to use the more obscure arts of the ninja world. You used an opponent's weakness to win a round without even having to fight them, saving yourself for the next round. You're being promoted by Narumi. Minato spoke to his daughter, clearly proud but also remaining professional. Naomi, you showed the ability to use an air rank in the Rasengan, which at your age is no small accomplishment. Your wind affinity has also grown leaps and bounds along with your Taijutsu. You knew when to cut your losses, and that too has earned you points towards the promotion, congratulations. Minato looked to the last person to be addressed, the winner of the exams, and his wayward son with a smile that Naruto returned with a blank stare. Naruto, you by far were the dark horse of this competition. During the second stage you were left to your own devices against full teams, and you came out unscathed. Then in the final stage you were overlooked for those who seemed to be aces from each village. You showed unpredictability and an unbelievable amount of strength to defeat a half-released Biju with a technique that showed you possess a tremendous amount of power within you. You are the winner of this tournament and a Chunin. With a few months in the field you will easily become a Jounin. Well done. The crowd cheered for those that had secured the promotions, getting waves from the more active shinobi, while the others remained reserved. Once all of the adulation was given, the crowd and shinobi began to funnel out of the stadium. Naruto was offered dinner with his family, which he turned down in favor of checking to see if his arm had been repaired by the Kyuubi. Naruto was the last to leave from the main entrance, and just as he was about to turn to face the direction he needed to go, he was pulled in the opposite direction. Naruto blinked in surprise as he came eye to eye with the orange pools of the Nanabi Jinchuriki. Fu blushed when she realized just how close she and Naruto had gotten. Acting quickly, she took a step back. Fu looked at the Chunin flak jacket slung over Naruto's right shoulder and gave an approving nod. Naruto smiled at his fellow Jinchuriki, glad to see her after missing out on seeing her the past handful of days. You got the promotion then? You wound me with those doubts, Fu-chan. Naruto exclaimed while clutching at his heart, playfully getting a small giggle from the mint-haired Kunoichi. So did you get promoted? I didn't see you at the ceremony. Naruto asked good-naturedly as he leaned against the outside wall of the stadium casually. Fu waved off Naruto's concerns with an easygoing grin plastered on her tanned face. This ceremony was only for those whose village leaders came here to Konoha, but yet I got a letter from the judges saying I was promoted. They also sent a letter to Taki. At the mention of her native village, Fu became uncharacteristically serious. About you getting me out of the village, Naruto-kun. Naruto pushed off the wall and motioned for Fu to come closer so he could tell her his plan for her defection. Well, you see, Fu-chan. Naruto whispered carefully into the ear of his fellow Jinchuriki. Somewhere in Tsuchi no Kuni, two figures were walking down a mountain path in the land of earth. Their pace showed no sign of hurry, but each step was purposeful. The wind blew the ends of their black cloaks with red clouds on them around gently. On the heads of the two figures were straw hats that had streamers that shrouded their faces from the view of the world. Both cloaked figures seemed to be pleased with walking in silence, since neither had even tried to talk with the other during the entirety of the silent walk. The cloaks they were wearing kept the slight tensing of their muscles underneath the cloak hidden. The cloaked figure on the left turned ever so slightly to look at their partner who was walking casually and in turn nodded subtly. The two figures leaped opposite directions, just as a deep slash made its mark on the ground where they were just standing before leaping away. The hats blew off of their heads, revealing a man with long blonde hair, a scope and a blue eye. The other man had short wavy blue hair and brown eyes. What is this? The blonde-haired shinobi asked, ending with an unusual nasal grunt to punctuate his sentence. His partner didn't answer him, too busy staring at the man across from him. Mihik and Itachi stood across from the two shinobi, looking at the dangerous shinobi across from them with guarded expressions. The tension between the four highly skilled shinobi could have been cut with a kunai. What are two S-rank shinobi doing here in the land of earth, especially considering one of them is a missing nin from the village of Iwagakure? Mihik asked sharply, not interested in any banter with the two shinobi across from him. The blonde shinobi looked across at Mihik with an annoyed glare. There was a personality clash between the two that created an instant dislike for the formidable swordsman. You know about us, do you? Leader Sama won't be pleased that people have gotten hold of that information. The scope-wearing shinobi said airily, not really even recognizing the two across from him as an immediate threat to his life. He was more worried about what his leader would do if he got angry. That is one scary man. The Iwa missing nin thought with a small shiver, thinking of his leader's eyes. Itachi, who had yet to activate his Sharingan, spoke up in place of his sensei at this time as he recalled some information he had drilled inside of his head. Looking at the blonde, Itachi started his recall. Deidara is an S-rank missing nin from Iwagakure who worked under the explosion corps with Iwa. He is wanted for an act of treason after blowing up crucial areas of Iwa and escaping with a number of Iwa's kenjutsu. Itachi ignored the proud, almost smug smile that Deidara was giving after having his feats listed off. Turning towards the shinobi with blue hair, Itachi began anew. Kurento is an S-rank missing nin from Kurigakure who left the village after the newest Mizukage was instated. Kurento is considered to be the eighth swordsman of the Hidden Mist thanks to his prodigal talent with swords of an unknown origin. Kurento has a high affinity for water that is comparable to Mizukage, Yugura. He left the village after killing hundreds of shinobi and left the Kiri equivalent of the Anbu in shambles. Deidara turned to the newly named Kurento with a low whistle, ignoring the two shinobi that stood across from him. Kurento ignored the whistle in favor of staring into the eyes of Mihik. Man, Kurento-sama, I forget just how scary you are sometimes. Dadara said with a nod before turning back to face Itachi with a smirk. The blonde bomber's hands twitched with anticipation, but didn't make a move towards the pouches on either of his hips, not yet. Dadara was thrilled to be facing down the shinobi across from him. Your lapdog is a well-informed Mihik. Kurento spoke sternly as he continued to glare into the hawk-like eyes of his fellow swordsman. Mihik Dracula is the S-rank wandering shinobi who has not joined a village despite requests from every village in existence. He had legendary skills in Kenjutsu and is only a level short of being a Fuinjutsu master. Seals on his blade Yoru amplify his wind-based attacks. Kurento droned out the information known on Mihik, getting the man's eyes to narrow on the blue-haired man. Mihik knew that this was a very dangerous thing and that he would need to be careful with this man. Dadara, seeing that everyone was sharing information with the other, decided to join in on the party with his own contribution. Itachi Uchiha is an S-rank missing nin from the village hidden in the leaves. Said to be a once-in-a-generation talent even among the Uchiha, left his village after massacring his clan in one night. Dadara's smirk grew once he saw the glare that Itachi was leveling him with. We are putting the mission on hold. Take Itachi off somewhere away from here and take care of him, I have a feeling we won't be getting away without a fight. Kurento commanded while reaching into his Akatsuki cloak. Dadara, who already had his hands in his pouches, nodded an affirmative. Sure thing Kurento-sama, have fun. A large owl made of some form of white substance came from the former Iwa explosive release user's hands. Hopping on top of the owl's head, Dadara motioned for the Uchiha to follow him, which he did since he was too dangerous for him to roam free. Pulling both of his hands from the back of his red clouded robes, Kurento was now armed with two ocean blue curved scimitar blades. Where the blades curved, the metal turned to white like foam coming off of a wave. Mihik Dracula will not stop until the blood that runs in your veins is covering my Namio Furu. Kurento growled out, holding the two scimitars in front of his chest in an X formation. Mihik frowned as he tried to think how this man, maybe 5 years younger than him, could muster so much hate for him. Mihik readied Yoru by pushing his chakra into the seals on his black blade, getting it to glow faintly with a green hue. Slashing the large blade, Mihik sent a wave of power towards Kurento, but it was cut off by an X-shaped wave of blue energy coming from Kurento. Drops of water shot from the collision of the two attacks surprised Mihik with just how much the blade could alter the chakra. Prodigal talent indeed. To be able to completely alter his chakra to the element of water takes nothing short of exceptional control and determination that is impressive. Mihik was forced to take a step back when the force of both of Kurento's scimitars slammed into his long sword. Kurento took a step back and slashed his Namio Furu in a coordinated combination that Mihik countered by parrying one blade into the other, throwing the attack off base. Joking up on the black blade, Mihik lashed out with a swift slash that put Kurento on the retreat to look for openings in Mihik's impeccable stance. Growing frustrated by the lack of an opening, Kurento took one of his blades and threw it at Mihik, whose eyes widened at the desperate and unexpected attack. Just when the blade was about to deflect off of Mihik's sword, the blue scimitar's flight path was altered by a leash of water that was wrapped around the handle. The new flight of the path caught Mihik off guard and the blade cut through his coat and into his side. The first blood belonged to Kurento, who knew it and smirked. Mihik looked at the blade that was coming back for a second strike and cut clean through the water leash, forcing the blade to fall back towards the ground. Kurento slid across the ground and in a fluid motion caught his blade and brought both up in a rising strike. Mihik brought his weapon in a downward arc, forcing Kurento to stop his attack and catch Yoru between his two scimitars that were held in an X position. Gritting his teeth, Kurento used all of his upper body strength to keep Mihik's sword from coming down on his face. When Kurento felt his arms buckle under the strength and leverage that Mihik had, he knew he needed a quick way out. Kurento's cheeks bloomed out as his mouth expanded with water that he shot at the gut of Mihik. However, Mihik was already acting to counter the move with his own field of expertise. The seal on Mihik's blade glowed a brilliant shade of green, which only caused it to stick out on the blade of black steel. The miniature-sized bullet of water hit the blade, but instead of exploding outward, it was absorbed into the blade. The seal, having done its job, faded away, leaving Mihik staring at Kurento stoically, while Kurento was glaring sternly at Mihik. Mihik pushed his chakra into the amplifying seal on his blade, getting the entire steel weapon to glow green. Mihik's power-up caught the attention of Kurento's, whose body visibly tensed in preparation for what was to come. I have underestimated your ability with your swords, and that has cost me a wound. That is to be expected of one who belongs to a group of S-rank criminals, however, so I have only myself to blame for that. I will remember your name, Kurento, goodbye. Mihik spoke confidently as he slashed his sword at Kurento, sending a massive wave of wind-infused energy. Kurento growled at the elder swordsman for underestimating him. He would not fall here on a mountain in the land of earth, that much was certain. Holding up his Namio Furu over his head, particles of water formed around the blades until it stuck to them like a coating. I won't lose here. I won't lose to you. Shattering waves. Slashing down his ocean blue scimitars caused massive waves to come roaring to life from the water gathering around the blades. The massive water attack came bearing down on the swift contained wind-infused slash in a dramatic collision. Both parties watched as their attacks opposed the attack of their opponent. Higher up on the mountain near its peak, Itachi was looking up at a chuckling Deidara, who was hovering just above the reach of his grand fireball. Itachi was adamant in believing that every has a weakness, but the aerial capabilities of the mad bomber were inconvenient. Itachi glared up into the eye of Deidara and had to fight the urge to smirk victoriously as he casted a genjutsu on the S-rank shinobi, using his fabled Sharingan. Deidara continued on oblivious to the state of altered perception he was placed in. Deidara buried his hands in the pouches on his sides and waited for the mouths on his palms to devour his clay. Taking an air of superiority, Deidara leered down at Itachi with a clear distaste in his blue eye and his lips contorted into a smug smirk. Now with all of the clay he needed, Deidara turned his palms to the ground where his hands started to regurgitate the white liquid. Itachi arched an eyebrow, not having seen the explosive release used in such a fashion. The shapeless glob of white started to spawn creations of varying shapes and sizes. Where some looked like bulky soldiers, others looked lean and agile. There was even a creation that was simply a pair of feet with two beady black spaces for eyes. Taking a step back as he recoiled in surprise, Itachi glared deeply at the creations of his opponent, almost as if he was trying to cause them to combust. The small pair of clay feet leaped at Itachi, getting his eyes to widen in surprise. Itachi, who thankfully started wielding a blade after getting back with Mihik, lashed out with his tanto slicing through the clay creature. Itachi's red eyes followed the strands of clay that came from each creature and saw that they were connected to Deidara, who was presumably controlling them. How was he so close? I know the genjutsu I used was to keep him from seeing the reverse of what he was doing. One of the larger creatures leaped towards Itachi, who wanted no part of the explosive artistic creation. Flashing through a series of hand signs in the blink of an eye, the Uchiha ended with the tiger sign. Fire release. Grand fireball. The ball of flames hit the clay consort head-on, resulting in a rattling explosion. Before Itachi could react, one of the more lean creatures speared through the cloud of debris and its chakra began to concentrate in one spot, the center. Itachi could hear the faint call of Katsu as he leapt away from the explosive just before it could self-destruct. Itachi came to a skidding halt with nothing more than a few dark, burn marks on his otherwise white cloak. Watching as the creatures swayed back and forth like a hypnotizing dance, Itachi looked up to his opponent with a questioning glance. Deidara started to laugh at Itachi's confusion, seeing that he had stumped the genius Uchiha. I trained myself to see through all forms of Sharingan Genjutsu after I had a run-in with one of your clansmen. He was pretty good with the Shunshin too, Deidara added as an afterthought, unknowingly referencing Shisui, Itachi's best friend. Itachi had to take a deep breath to keep himself level-headed. I am glad that you managed to survive my C1. If you had bitten the dust with such low-level explosives, I would have found your defeat highly disappointing, Deidara admitted as the small C1 soldiers had formed back together into one ambiguous blob of liquefied clay. Soon the shapeless mass split into two and was shaped into twin clay dragons that took into the air in tandem and shot off for the Konoha missing Nin. Itachi quickly slipped past both of the larger projectiles, but then they turned back and came again. Itachi silently cursed the fact that they seemed to hone in on his presence. Deidara watched on with amusement as Itachi continued to try and dance his way through his beautiful creations, an act he saw to be futile. Deidara observed as Itachi slipped into a few trees that dotted the mountain's surface. There were a few minutes where the explosive virtuoso waited in silence on top of his owl until Itachi crept back into the clearing. The next moment both dragons dive-bombed Itachi from the sky and detonated right on top of him. Deidara was left watching with anticipation as the dust cleared, and when all that was left was a large crater from the explosive properties of the C2 dragons, he laughed. It looks like the almighty Itachi Uchiha was nothing more than a bunch of bullshit created by the people of Konoha. I should have known. Haha. Deidara continued to laugh as his owl started to make its way back down lower on the mountain to find Kurento. A glimpse picked up from the scope over his eye had Deidara leaping off the head of the owl on instinct. And just in time as Itachi's tanto was buried into the neck of the owl. Itachi, landing on its head, used his chakra and kicked it down, sending it spiraling down to land behind its master. Oh? So you survived the C2 as well, eh? Good, now you can taste my C3 creations and tell me what you think of my art. Deidara spoke gleefully as he moved to take some of the clay that created the owl from before. Itachi's body tensed as he prepared himself to face an even more destructive explosive from the former explosive's core member. Suddenly, before Deidara could go any further, Kurento dropped on the field right next to Deidara. He looked worse for wear with cuts all over his cloak and blood dripping from his right shoulder, quite badly too. Kurento-sama, what happened to you? Deidara asked, not having seen his partner ever look so beaten. Kurento grunted as he turned to face Dodara with a blank face, not giving off any of the pain he was feeling. The look in his eyes was there only for a moment, but there was a burning fury in his eyes. Dodara, we are going. Leader Sama has called us in. Kurento spoke sternly as he clasped a hand on his blonde partner's shoulders. Before Dodara could voice his opinion on the order, both shinobi disappeared in a cyclone of water, Kurento's hyper-powered version of a Mizu Shunshin, leaving Itachi standing in the field alone. Not a moment later Mihik dropped into the clearing with a small amount of cuts on his coat and pants, but not bleeding anywhere visible. Student and mentor looked at each other for the briefest of moments before nodding at the same time. Chapter 13. Mission. Elimination. 9 spectral figures gathered around a large open cavern, each not uttering a single word to the other. With a closer inspection you could see that the 9 phantom figures were standing on the tips of large fingers, with only the little finger on the left hand, lacking a presence on it. Soon each finger began to glow before a black kanji came to life one after one on the fingers. The right thumb glowed with word 0. Next was the right index finger that glowed with the words green, blue. The right middle finger's kanji came up next, and it was for the word white. The next kanji was the kanji that was on the right ring finger, and it showed scarlet. The right little finger glowed with the sign associated with the boar. The left little finger did not light up with the rest due to the lack of a spectral figure on the finger. The next finger that was lit up was the left ring finger, and that one was displaying the word south. The left middle finger came up next, and it was glowing with the kanji for north. The left index came next and was showing off the kanji for 3. Finally the left thumb ended the series of kanji with ball. Each person was dressed in robes similar to those of Kurento and Dodara's, despite the color being faded from the technique used to create the projections. The figure on the right thumb whose eyes were closed finally opened them to stare at the shinobi on the finger with scarlet glowing. There for all other 8 members to see was the ripple pattern that spread across each eye. This was known as the greatest of all, the Sakurai eye or the Rinnegan. Kurento did his best to not shift under the eyes belonging to the Sage of 6 Paths, which took a great amount of willpower. Dodara glanced at his partner inwardly relieved that he wouldn't be on the receiving end of that dreadful glare that day. Why have you failed your mission? The man with Rinnegan asked irritability, seeing as how their plan to seal 2 of the Biju at once had failed with the failure of the mission. Failure was not something he wanted to become a regularity. The Akatsuki needed to be precise and clean, not botching any of the chances they had to obtain a Jinchuriki. The Rinnegan wielder had specifically sent Dodara and his partner to retrieve the 5 tails because of the explosives user's knowledge of the land of Earth. The man looked at Kurento with expectation that the excuse that he had come up with was certainly a good one. He hoped so for their sake. We ran into unforeseen circumstances called Pain Sama that caused us to lose the trail of the Gobi and its container Han. Kurento replied evenly, his nervousness around the leader of the Akatsuki offset by the irritation of losing to Mihik, badly, not that he'd admit that. It was a blow to his pride to be dismissed by Mihik like he was then to be beaten handily, only made the feeling grow. What kind of circumstance could take precedence over obtaining one of the Biju? A firm feminine voice asked in place of Pain. This was Pain's childhood friend who was with the Akatsuki organization since its founding Konan. Her loyalty belonged to Pain, and she felt that this failure was almost as if they had failed Pain himself. The idea of which was blasphemous to the Kunoichi. The 2 of us ran into another team of 2S rank shinobi, Mihik Dracula and Itachi Uchiha. The 2 were working in collusion and seemed to know at least something about us, and they stepped in to try and stop us. You called us here mid-fight. Kurento informed the other Akatsuki members with a scowl. Mihik Dracula and Itachi Uchiha. An excited voice asked with a small, appreciative whistle at the prospect of that kind of duo. That sounds like a whole different kind of 2-headed monster to me. Sasori, should we really try to visit those 2? A large man asked his partner with a large shark-like grin on his face. The frame that was spherical in shape and possibly hunched over gave a small grunt when he heard the question that was asked of him. You're the same battle maniac as always, but yes, I would love an Uchiha puppet to use as art. Sasori's voice was gruff and very deep compared to those who had spoken thus far. Both of those men have quite the pretty bounty placed on their heads, perhaps I could pay a visit to the 2. A voice that is not quite as deep as Sasori's added with his voice becoming filled with glee when he mentioned the bounties of Itachi and Mihik. Almost as if money was the driving force behind his life. Fuck you and your money Kakuzu. Why the fuck am I paired with this heathen when he would make such a better sacrifice to Jashin-sama? A figure shouted very loudly with a scythe strapped to his back. Around his neck was a circle with an upside-down triangle within the circle. Pain had had enough with the useless chatter within his members about their different hobbies and passions. It wasn't helping them with their sealing of Yonbi, and therefore it was unnecessary. That is enough. From now on if any of you happen to cross paths with those 2 while out on your missions you are to eliminate them. This also means we will need to be more cautious with our activities. For now focus on finishing on sealing the Yonbi. The other 8 members uttered a yes leader Sama in unison before falling silent, focusing on sealing the 4 tails into the giant humanoid statue they were standing on. In the silence a number of the members looked at the elderly man with red hair, beard and mustache, dressed in a long red-sleeved shirt and pants with mesh armor underneath, the soon-to-be-deceased, former Jinchuriki of the 4 Tails Rashi of the Lava Release. On Hagakure, Naruto stood there staring distastefully at the Hokage's mansion with his cool blue eyes and dressed in his clothing from the Chunin exams. Now that he was fully recovered there was now time to deal with the council and their infinite wisdom. Naruto was not staring at the mansion of the Hokage distastefully due to any kind of theological disagreement or anything on that level. He looked at the building the way he did because it was where the council was no doubt waiting. The Chunin exams winner could already recite the questions he was going to be asked by the fools residing there. In their safety blanket of the council the fools had become predictable and boring. Naruto figured that if he was being called upon immediately after the Chunin exams which were his personal coming out party so to speak, then there were 3 likely parties responsible for this. Homura, Kaheru, and Danzo 3 advisors from back in the Sandame's reign, each of which was said to love Konoha just as much as Hiruzen yet the way they went about it was shady at best. Naruto was pretty confident that they would try to pressure and manipulate the laws into making him some sort of weapon or breeding stock to serve the village. And if there was one thing that Naruto wouldn't be, it was manipulation. Naruto strolled into the front of the building, his whole person emitting a cool confidence that had a few people deciding against addressing him. The few people working who were going to say something swallowed their words nervously when they saw the electric blue eyes that seemed to be staring right through them. Naruto allowed himself to wear the faintest of smirks to come past his face, seeing he was starting to earn respect even if it was out of fear. Naruto walked to the doors of the council chambers and gave the door a momentary glance before entering the room where a number of annoyances were present. Naruto cast an observatory glance across the room going over each of the clan heads, followed by the 3 advisors and finally the 5 civilian council members. Naruto restrained himself from giving the civilians the leers they were shooting his way. He had no desire to give them any ammunition to use against him, which no doubt would lead to proof of his demonhood. Naruto's azure eyes drifted towards his father with a look of apathy, seeing he had the look of Hokage on his face instead of a father. "You called for my presence, Hokage-sama?" Naruto asked levelly, ignoring the council for the most part. "Yes, Naruto. Due to your performance in the latest Chunin exams the council has some questions they would like to ask you." Minato spoke seriously, but he had none of these questions that he spoke of so he remained silent. Naruto nodded and turned to face the council with a stark disinterest. Kaheru posed the first question of this council session. "When did you awaken the Sharingan?" The question was blunt and showed no respect for something Naruto had expected. The decrepit old fossil was nothing but predictable, and Naruto assumed that there would be a follow-up question, meant to snare him into being put under their thumb. Naruto closed his eyes and when he opened them Naruto showed off his fully matured Sharingan. "I came upon these eyes during my time outside of the village's walls." Naruto spoke calmly, his eyes looking past the old woman at the wall behind her, blatantly. The woman frowned, but if it was because of his answer his actions were not determinable. The civilians had to bite their lower lip to prevent them from defaming the Uchiha Jinchuriki. "What did you do during this time that awakened the Uchiha's bloodline?" Homura asked sternly, looking at the teen who stood in front of them completely at ease. The elderly man frowned at the confidence the boy was showing. It was too unfounded in his opinion, and it could spell trouble in the future. "I will not be divulging my activities during that time, seeing as how I was not an active shinobi in Konoha's system." Naruto spoke evenly as he glanced at the male who had posed the question with an almost dismissive glance. Homura's brow twitched slightly at the refusal Naruto had given to him, but he was beaten to respond by an outburst from a civilian. "Silence, boy. You are lucky to even be standing here, so stop being difficult and answer the questions of the council." The man shouted down at Naruto, wisely avoiding the word demon that would have only brought him a swift death. The man was well into his life and was dressed lavishly. Naruto glanced at the civilian parasite with his Sharingan spinning menacingly while his lips gave no facial expression. "You civilians are lucky to even be here considering this is clearly a matter between shinobi. It would be wise for you to sit down and silence yourself before I do it for you." Naruto spoke firmly while directing a small dose of killing intent at the man that made Naruto look like he was wearing the mask of the Shinigami. Hiruzen, who was sitting at the seat for the Sarutobi clan, looked at Naruto and shivered slightly as he had a flashback of the times he had met Madara Uchiha. That man was able to inspire fear with his glance all the while looking completely bored much like Naruto was doing just now. Now that I think about it, his hairstyle is very much like that of Madara's. All he is missing is that armor. Then why not tell the Hokage of your Sharingan when you come back to the village for Naruto-sent service? Inoichi Yamanaka, the clan head of the Yamanaka, asked curiously, giving Naruto a pleasant surprise with how respectfully he had addressed him. Naruto looked at the man who leaned back into his seat when his eyes made contact with Naruto's Sharingan. During my time away from the village the Uchiha were slaughtered. What was to stop the same thing from happening to me? Naruto asked rhetorically, his eyes surveying the room without his head moving. Naruto ignored the skeptical looks he was getting from Hiashi and some of the other clan heads. Internally Shikaku, the clan leader of the Nara, was smirking at how Naruto had played the situation. It was obviously a lie considering just who his parents were, but it was constructed in such a way that it could easily be considered a truthful explanation. The Nara clan head, who was a very perceptive man, realized just how dangerous Naruto could be. That brought a smile to Shikaku's face. "May I ask you to tell us where your Uchiha blood comes from, Naruto-san?" Shibi Aburam, the Aburam clan head, was a man not to be swayed by emotional appeals, but rather cold-hearted logic and factual statements. Naruto looked at the man and wondered if all Aburam wore glasses and hid their faces behind overly large trench coats. "I am afraid I cannot see Shibi-san, seeing as that would be a clan secret." Naruto replied, definitely using the excuse of it being a clan secret to hide the fact that he and Itachi had yet to determine the answer to that question. He didn't need to tell this power grab of the council, however. The Harry's face twisted up in agitation seeing how this boy had not given them anything thus far, despite the things they already knew. He was being vague and gave no details, which annoyed her to no end. It was this culmination of factors that led to her angry outburst, which was directed at Naruto. "We are the council boys. You will answer the questions of your superiors and you will do it satisfactorily." Surprisingly, it was not Naruto who responded to her demand, but when he realized just who responded on his behalf, it was no longer really that surprising. "Watch yourself, advisor. What you are demanding is an Uchiha clan secret and will set a dangerous precedent for all of the clans." Makoto spoke heatedly, taking up Naruto's defense, getting the teen to crack a smile in gratitude, seeing how she played along. The Haru saw that all of the clan heads nodded their heads with the Uchiha matriarch's words back down, but she was still wearing a prominent frown. Kushina cleared her throat, getting the eyes of her son to snap towards her. The Uzumaki woman decided now was the time to get the answer to the question she posed in the hospital room. "Naruto, I would like to ask you about the Fuinjutsu technique you used during your second match in the exams." Kushina spoke calmly, looking at her son directly to try and find any sign of anything. Unfortunately for her, Naruto's body showed nothing but a stoic visage, like nothing could bother or fluster him. "Tell me, do you know what makes an Uzumaki clan head?" Naruto wondered aloud, seemingly had to disregard Kushina's question, but Kushina knew that Naruto kept his word over anything else, so she wasn't bothered by his own question. Kushina leaned back into her chair and her eyes closed, trying to remember what Mito Uzumaki had told her so long ago. Minato and all the other shinobi on the council looked over at the red-headed woman, curious as to what the answer was themselves. Kushina's eyes suddenly flipped open and she let out a small gasp at the implications of Naruto's question. Her son couldn't be the Uzumaki clan head when she wasn't. It wouldn't make sense. The room all looked at Kushina curiously except for Naruto as he waited for his mother to verbally connect the dots for the rest of the room, who were clearly waiting anxiously. "Why, you're the Uzumaki clan head, Naruto-kun?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly in shock. Naruto didn't answer that either, instead the young Uchiha took one step back away from the large desk. Naruto took his deep blue vest off along with his chain mesh underneath, leaving his torso bare, shocking the room with his brash actions. Naruto brought his hand up to his heart where an Uzumaki swirl was resting on his skin. Naruto spoke like he was reading from an old scroller tome. "The Uzumaki swirl over the heart of an Uzumaki shows the sign of the current clan head and can't be removed until the clan head names a successor or dies. But how? I visited the ruins of Yuzu and I couldn't access the main chamber even with my entire prowess in the art of sealing. How did you get in when even your mother couldn't get in?" Kushina asked, watching as Naruto redressed himself and regarded her with a bored stare directed at her. The woman did her best not to shy away from her son's Sharingan stare, but returned it with a determined one. The Uzumaki clan was a clan not only known for their phenomenal skill in Fuinjutsu, but also for their love for those around them. The clan head of the Uzumaki is a person whose heart is strong, but also holds the most love in it. It is my heart that met those requirements and granted me access to the main chamber. Naruto spoke calmly, drawing in even Minato in the short but informative tale of the long-lost clan. Most of the shinobi found themselves admiring the goals of the Uzumaki and could only imagine if they remained thriving in this age. Anzo, who had remained silent throughout the entire council session, was staring at Naruto with no small amount of intensity. The shinobi in front of him came from two prestigious clans that, despite their weakened, almost non-existent state, held no small amount of potential. The secret commander of Root knew he couldn't take the boy because he had become too visible in Konoha, but he could use the boy for the betterment of Konoha. There could be no way that Naruto would turn down his proposition, since it could be considered a dream to many people. All he needed to do was offer it. Seeing as Naruto possesses the blood of both the Uchiha clan and Uzumaki clan, I recommend that we put him under the Clan Restoration Act. This way we can strengthen both clans and maybe combine them if possible. Danzo spoke calmly, looking at Naruto with one good eye, seeing if the boy would give him any kind of usable reaction. Naruto stared up at the Warhawk, and the two were engaged in a battle of wills. Danzo and Naruto both missed the dangerous looks in the eyes of Kushina, and Makoto directed at the Shimura as they stared each other down. Minato and Hiruzen were able to keep a much more neutral look, but it was clear they didn't like the idea either. Just when it looked as if someone would speak on his behalf, Naruto answered. No. Tahara looked down at Naruto if such a thing was possible with a smug smirk on her face, almost as if Naruto's answer was pathetic. Naruto didn't seem to notice the look on her face because he didn't find her worth any of his attention. You have no choice in this, boy. This is an order from the council. We practically own you. The word choice earned her frowns from the shinobi and smirks from the civilians. Naruto had to resist the urge to roll his eyes at the foolish woman who was clearly drunk with her own power. Then again he knew that it would only make this next part all the more enjoyable. You do not have a choice in the matter. I am the clan head of the Uzumaki, and as such I come from a clan that did not originate in Konohagakure. You have no power to hold a foreign clan to your laws. It is only because there was no real clan head that you are allowed to remain using the swirl on your uniforms in the first place. Danzo and Homura glared down at Naruto, who continued to try and successfully defy them at every turn. Danzo was sure that Naruto would accept what he was offering to him, but the Uchiha had proven to be abnormal. The teen was offered an assortment of women for him to indulge himself in, yet he had basically said that he had no interest in that. Danzo's hand clutched his cane tightly because that unpredictability meant he was dangerous. Naruto is right about that. Even though he has the blood of an Uchiha, his position as the clan head of the Uzumaki supersedes the Uchiha part. We hold nothing over Naruto. Hiruzen spoke with experience, having read over the act that Hashirama had created many times during his time as the Hokage. Naruto said nothing and only nodded gladly that he wouldn't have to explain himself any further. The lone woman on the civilian council sent a cruel smirk towards Naruto, who remained stoic as usual. Naruto could see the gears turning in her more than likely hate-filled mind and waited for her surefire way to try and screw him over. Then why are we keeping the Uzumaki in the village walls when he could be a threat to our safety? The woman asked, implying that perhaps Naruto should be exiled. Naruto mentally congratulated the woman for putting a halfway decent proposition on the table instead of an irrational piece of garbage. Naruto looked at the woman with a bored expression. The only thing on his face that was moved was one of his eyebrows. You speak as if I am afraid of being banished from this village. Minato's normally welcoming blue eyes hardened where he saw this was going, and he was certain that he wasn't going to lose his son just because a civilian who shouldn't even be present couldn't shut her mouth. That's enough. We will not be banishing or kicking my son out of the village, and that's final. Now then, is there anything else that needs to be discussed before this meeting is closed? To the surprise of nearly everyone that was gathered, it was Naruto who had spoken when the final call was given. Yes, I have something I would like to bring up. There was a girl named Fu who tried to break into my apartment complex, which in essence is the Uzumaki compound. That girl is Taki's Jinchuriki. Homura spoke up, cutting off Naruto from making the point he wanted to make. Something Naruto did not find amusing if the glare he leveled the elder man with was any indication. The glare silenced the elder, who could see how irritated Naruto was, but said nothing, afraid the Uzumaki might lash out at him, then deal with the consequences. As I was saying before the annoying interruption, I caught Fu trying to break into my complex where there are things that are sensitive to my clan. It is for that reason that I thought it would be wise to inform you that I would be detaining her personally. Naruto's agitation quickly faded back into nothing more than a neutral drawl. Throughout the entire point, Naruto was staring at the yellow flash, whose was the only opinion that mattered. We can't take Taki's Jinchuriki. They have been our allies for decades. If we were to take their weapon, they would surely retaliate. Kaharu screeched out indignantly, getting a nod from Homura. Danzo showed nothing, since having the 7 tails in Konoha would definitely be a power boost, but it could also cause more problems than it was worth in the end. Is it not the law that if an intruder is caught breaking into the compound of any clan currently residing in Konoha, that the clan leader has the express right to either detain or execute the perpetrator, Hiashi-san? Naruto spoke, looking at the stoic clan head of the Hyuga, whose eyes narrowed upon being addressed. The Hyuga patriarch knew the incident that Naruto was referring to, but wondered how Naruto knew about that since it happened when he was 5. Could he have possibly prepared that much? Which were the Hyuga's thoughts. When Hinata was 5, a representative from Kumo came to the village to create a treaty, but that was only a cover to try and steal the Byakugan, and to do so, he tried to kidnap Hinata. He managed to catch up to the man, and instead of detaining the man, he killed him swiftly. Hiashi nodded his head slightly, not once losing his composure. That is correct. I am choosing to take the girl as a slave, if you will, instead of killing her. That is my choice. Naruto spoke calmly despite the foul taste that was left in his mouth from calling Fu a slave. That was another thing Naruto loathed about politics, he hated having to speak like a drone without the ability to speak normally. Very well, I will send a letter to the leader and Taki explaining the situation. That is the end of this meeting. Minato spoke behind his laced-together fingers, allowing the counselors to get out of the stuffy room. Minato looked at his son sadly just from the thought of him taking a slave, it wasn't right. Oh, and from now on I am either to be called Naruto Uchiha or Naruto Uzumaki. With that, Naruto disappeared in a wind shunshin, and the only thing Minato saw as he left was the charm Narumi had bought for Naruto was the charm with the initials UN. Naruto was sitting across from Mikoto with a woman glaring holes into Naruto's skull, while he looked sheepish at the woman he saw as his true mother. Naruto knew that as soon as she got a hold from him he was in for a scolding, so her Sharingan glare was not so bad compared to what he thought he was going to get. He expected she would be angry at him for holding out on the Sharingan, but he had his reasons, and hopefully she would understand that. That didn't stop Naruto from sighing in relief when Mikoto finally let her Sharingan recede back into her natural dark eyes. Naruto, why didn't you tell me that you had the Sharingan, and don't bother trying to say that you just got it because I know a fully matured Sharingan when I see one. Mikoto scolded Naruto sternly, which he responded to by staring at her determinedly. Mikoto sighed internally when she saw that look that he would give her back in his childhood. It was that look that told her Naruto would not back down from this. I didn't come to you with this because it would be easier to keep you safe if you didn't know about it. Naruto spoke with a voice full of conviction as his blue eyes stared right into Mikoto's black ones. There was no doubt in the Uzumaki clan head's mind that he had made the right choice in doing so. Mikoto didn't move a muscle as she continued to stare at her surrogate son, trying to find anything in his facial features, but there was nothing, just like Itachi. She knew that it wasn't because Naruto didn't trust her. He did it to protect her, and she understood that, but it was still frustrating to be left in the dark. Why? I could have helped you try and figure out why there is Uchiha blood inside of you in the first place. Naruto smiled a genuine smile when he heard the care inside of Mikoto's soft voice, glad that she hadn't changed having to deal with Sasuke for so long. Naruto shook his head softly with a small smile, getting a frown from the older Uchiha. I don't think you could have Mikoto-chan. Itachi-sensei and I visited a number of old Uchiha hideouts he used during his Anbu days, and we couldn't find anything. And this way I could keep you out of the crossfire in case I let something slip. Naruto added on, kindly, getting a small smile from Mikoto, who was glad to see Naruto still had that caring side. Mikoto shook her head in amusement with a small giggle, getting Naruto to turn his head to the side in curiosity. Mikoto waved Naruto's questioning look off with a small wave from her hand as she reined in her laughter. Looking at Naruto, she gave the boy a large smile that he returned on a smaller scale. Fine, I understand why you did what you did. From now on, however, I want to promise you that you will not keep things like that from me. Naruto frowned slightly when Mikoto assertively badgered him into promising her to be more open. But, I said promise me, Naru-kun. Mikoto exclaimed firmly, getting Naruto to curse internally at his need to fulfill his words. He wasn't sure why he was intrinsically motivated to keep promises, since he was sure that he was the only Uchiha that was like that. Then Naruto cursed himself for being so different since it made things more difficult. Fine, I promise I won't keep the big things from you anymore. Naruto relented with a defeated sigh, getting Mikoto to smile victoriously. Naruto smiled when he saw her smile, knowing he couldn't deny his mother figure for too long before he caved. But that was okay for him since she was one of his precious people. Now then, you can tell me why you plan on taking that young girl as a slave instead of letting her return home. Mikoto spoke with an overly sweet smile that told Naruto if he gave her the wrong answer, then he would be in a world of pain. That danger registered with Naruto, immediately making him wave his hands in defense furiously. Seeing that the smile did not fade away, Naruto swallowed down the nervous feeling that only a few people could instill in him. Naruto, remembering just what Fu told him about her past, became serious, something Mikoto noticed and looked at Naruto in worry. I didn't meet Fu by chance. When I reached the tower in the second stage, I overheard her teammates calling her a demon and things of that nature. So I went to talk to her, and her story wasn't a happy one. She wasn't beaten like I was, but instead she was completely isolated by everyone in Taki. She didn't have someone like you taking care of her like you did for me. We came up with this plan, and that slave part is just a cover so I can keep her near me and give her a friend. Naruto's eyes iced over, giving them a cool determination that Mikoto knew all too well. At first mention of this idea of a slave at the council meeting, Mikoto was going to go out of her way to correct that sideways form of thinking, but she wanted to give Naruto a chance to explain himself. Now, hearing his reasoning, she couldn't be more proud of the little boy she knew all those years ago that was becoming a fine man. I think you are getting soft, Naru-kun. I knew that tough guy act was all for show. Mikoto said happily, getting a small tick mark to form on Naruto's forehead. Mikoto saw it and giggled into her hand, having missed being able to tease the young man across from her. Yup, just one big old softie. Hey. Naruto, in the aftermath of talking with Makoto about everything that has happened around him, trudged back into his apartment complex drained of all his energy. Naruto opened the door and found his slave seated on his couch watching television. She gave Naruto a bright smile, and the two talked for about a half of an hour about what happened on Naruto's day. Naruto was about to stand up, head to his bedroom where he could rest and hopefully recharge his batteries after that dull meeting with the council. The talk with Makoto wasn't as bad, but he was still drained from before that, so he was still feeling a bit tired. Naruto smiled at the thought of getting some meaningful sleep. Just before Naruto could take a step away, Fu tugged on his arm, forcefully forcing him to take the seat next to her on the couch. Fu glanced up at him with her orange eyes and gave him a brilliant smile. "Come on, Naruto-kun, you could at least relax and watch some television with me." Naruto looked down at her and couldn't find himself able to deny the woman her request and relented with a quick nod and a small grin. Fu cheered quietly, getting a chuckle from Naruto, who got comfortable. Fu wrapped her arms around Naruto's arm and leaned her head on his shoulder, obviously getting comfortable herself. The pair watched any and everything until the sun went down, when Naruto felt the need to get up and stretch before going to bed. Looking down at his shoulder, he saw that Fu was already asleep with a small smile on her face. Naruto decided against waking her up after a few moments of deliberation. In the end, Naruto just brushed off her actions as her need for some form of emotional support from her only friend. Naruto was unaware that the feelings were anything more than those of friendship. Naruto looked up to the roof of his apartment complex before leaning his head back into his couch. I guess this is comfortable enough. Naruto thought constantly as his eyes slowly closed and he faded into the land of slumber, with Fu sleeping happily on his shoulder. It was quite the scene for the third-party Susei, who was watching from the balcony. "You called for me?" Naruto asked as he looked at his father, who was calmly seated behind his desk looking straight back at Naruto. Naruto was dressed in his blue vest with the trident separating the two clan emblems. Lower body equipped with black shinobi pants and twilight clipped on a sword belt around his waist, Naruto was geared up and ready for his first mission as a chunin of the village hidden in the leaves. Minato nodded his head slowly and thumbed through a stack of papers, nodding when he found the piece of paper he was looking for. Handing the paper over to his son, Minato spoke. "Yes, I did, Naruto. You have been called to take this mission.